Okay, bioenergetics. How an animal gets energy. So the flow of energy through the animal limits behavior, growth, and reproduction. So it determines on how much food, how many kilocalories an animal needs to do all of these things. And this is called bioenergy. Energy processes. Always some energy is lost in heat. Okay, so energy-containing molecules from food make ATP, powers cellular work. We need ATP. So after the needs of staying alive are met, the remaining food molecules can be used for biosynthesis, growth, etc. So organic molecules in food, they are broken down, they're digested, they're absorbed, heat is given off, some energy is lost in feces, and then the nutrients then go to the body cells where, again, more filtration occurs, some energy lost in urine, but then most of the energy going to cellular respiration. Again, heat given off, but ATP is produced. And after ATP is produced, then biosynthesis can occur, which joins with nutrients from the food to make carbon skeletons. And this, in turn, biosynthesis, growth, storage, and reproduction. So ATP for here to join molecules together. It's an anabolic process. Here, cellular work broken down. Catabolic process, heat and heat. So this is energy flow, quantifying energy use, metabolic rate. Okay, we all have metabolic rates, amount of energy an animal uses in a unit of time. So it can be measured by the amount of oxygen taken in or consumed, or the carbon dioxide produced or expelled. So the photograph on the left shows a ghost crab hooked up, poor little thing, to a respirometer. The temperature is held constant in the chamber with a known amount of oxygen concentration going through. And the crab's metabolic rate is calculated, the difference between the amount of oxygen entering and the amount of oxygen leaving. And this little crab's running on a treadmill. Okay, so let's jump over here to humans. You can also measure it here, the metabolic rate of a man fitted with the breathing apparatus. So in oxygen in, CO2. So bioenergetic strategies, birds and mammals, endothermic, and amphibians and reptiles, ectothermic. Okay, so the simple definitions, which you probably already know: endotherms are warm mostly by heat generated by metabolism, by cellular respiration, by ATP being produced. Endotherms have a higher metabolic rate. Okay, amphibians and reptiles are ectotherms. They gain their heat mostly from external sources, and their behavior is dictated by that. So they will move to the sun or to a hot rock that's been warmed by the sun to warm themselves. So consequently, ectotherms can hibernate for a long period of time, and they have much lower metabolic rates. Size and metabolic rate. It's interesting that the metabolic rate per gram is inversely related to the body size. Okay, so that means the smaller the animal, the higher the metabolic rate. So each gram of a mouse requires 20 times as many calories as a gram of an elephant. So the mouse has a much higher metabolic rate than an elephant. Okay, so the difference between a basal metabolic rate and a standard metabolic rate. So the basic BMR is used for measuring the metabolic rate of an endotherm. Okay, so we've gone over the difference between an endotherm and an ectotherm. So an endotherm, this is measured non-growing, empty stomach, and no stress. And it's been determined that for males to maintain their BMR, they need 16 to 18 kilocalories a day. Females, 13 to 1500 kilocalories a day. The standard metabolic rate in an ectotherm at rest, fasting, non-stressed at a particular temperature, and this activity greatly affects the metabolic rate with both of these. So here we're comparing an endotherm humans with an ectotherm alligator. So human metabolic rate, 1.2 kilocalories per minute. Okay, pretty high metabolic rate compared to this ectotherm alligator. Their standard metabolic rate is 0.04 kilocalories per minute, so much lower. So humans, since they have a higher metabolic rate, they can sustain a higher maximum metabolic rate over a longer period of time because we have a greater respiration rate. So endotherms have a greater respiration rate. So looking at this picture here, you can see second, minute, hour, day, and week. The yellow is existing intracellular ATP, alligator, human, how it disappears. ATP from glycolysis, okay, that's like fermentation. So that's the lighter orange here. And you can see the alligator hangs onto that longer. And then ATP from aerobic respiration. And here the endotherms win that hands down. So a greater respiration rate in energy, but here this is containing this is illustrating the energy budget for 4 animals. This pregnant woman, penguin, deer mouse, and python. So different species use energy and material and foods in different ways depending on their environment. So this python on the right requires much less energy, okay, you can see, than a penguin, and they're about the same size. Okay, so you can look at this and compare and contrast total annual energy expenditures, and here is per unit mass, okay, the weight. So here, deer mass, penguin, human, and python. Okay, homeostasis, I'm sure you've heard this before. The internal environment of invertebrates has interstitial fluid, so it's very different from the external environment. So homeostasis is that balance between external changes in the animal's internal control that oppose these changes to keep everything in check. Okay, they're regulators and conformers. So this is just an example of how animals regulate their themselves with internal controls. So two extremes. A regulator uses internal control mechanisms to moderate internal change with their external environment. So their external environment excuse me, affects how their internal mechanisms will work, such as freshwater fish maintaining a stable internal concentration of solutes in blood and interstitial fluid. Concentration is different from the water in which it lives. Okay, so it's very, whereas that's a regulator. However, a conformer conforms to its external environment. A lot of marine invertebrates, such as spider crabs, live in salty environments, marine environments, where the solute concentration or salinity is relatively stable. So they don't regulate its internal solute concentration, but they conform. They conform. They become similar to its external environment. Okay, how is homeostasis controlled in an animal? So it has three parts: the receptor, control center, and effector. So most homeostatic control systems function by negative feedback, and we have talked about negative and positive feedback, where the buildup of the end product shuts the system off. So that's usually how homeostasis is. This is a simple little diagram talking about negative feedback. It's a non-living example. So regulating room temperature. The control center, or the thermostat, detects temperature change and activates mechanisms that reverse that change. Too cold, heat turns on, heat produced, room temperature increases. Okay? Too hot, heater turned off, no heat produced, room temperature decreases. So think about a human, how we react if it's too cold. Okay? If it's too cold in our extremities, our blood vessels dilate to warm up those areas. We can shiver, which produces heat. If it's too hot, blood vessels and extremities constrict, and then we can lose excess heat by evaporative cooling. Actually, I got that wrong. When it's too hot, our blood vessels dilate, and when it's too cold, our blood vessels and extremities constrict. Sorry about that. To conserve heat, they constrict, they dilate to give off heat. Process by which animals maintain an internal temperature within a tolerable range. Ectotherms. Some examples, you all know what ectotherms are. Most invertebrates, fish, amphibians, non-bird reptiles. Endotherms, birds and mammals. So, as you just general consensus, common sense, you probably know ectotherms tolerate a greater variation in internal temperature than endotherms. Endothermy is more energetically expensive, needs more ATP, more cellular respiration than ectothermy. Buffers the animal's internal temperatures against external fluctuations. And it also enables the animal to maintain a high level of aerobic metabolism. So we've established this in the past couple slides about how the metabolic rate is higher in endotherms than ectotherms, and cellular respiration is greater in endotherms than ectotherms. Okay, this is the relationship between body temperature and environmental temperature. You're comparing an endotherm, a river otter, and an ectotherm, this largemouth bass. So you can see the river otter has a high metabolic rate. It generates heat, maintains stable body temperature through a wide range of temperatures. From, this is in centigrade, so down around 5 degrees centigrade up to 40, the internal temperature remains the same. Whereas this largemouth bass, ectotherm, you can see the temperature is down here, is low, and it increases the internal temperature as the external temperature increases. So it conforms to the water temperature. So here are modes of heat exchange in ectotherms. They can exchange heat by evaporation, radiation from the sun, convection from the wind, conduction. The sun has heated up the molecules of this rock, so it's hot for this, whatever this thing is, iguana to sit on, and warming by that. So warmed, warm, cooling, cooling. So 5 general adaptations help animals thermoregulate. Insulation, circulatory adaptations, cooling by evaporative heat loss, behavioral responses, and adjusting metabolic heat production.